Hello everyone, welcome back to Zach Sly. We're starting on page 58. So they have just moved to Elko, Nevada. They have just seen their new house. Jack is realizing it's small but doable. Joanne is kind of falling apart at the seams, or rather Wanda at this point, and their mom is also realizing that this house is smaller than they realized. So, continuing in with our reading today, let's go. So, we ended and we have just a teeny bit left before we get into the 3E's, part 2. Uncle Don started to protest, but Aunt Doris cut him off. Don, why don't you go out and see if you can find us some food? She pushed him towards the front door, which was about 5 steps from the kitchen. Want to come with me, Zach? Uncle Don asked. Zach shook his head, and Uncle Don left, happy to get out of there. Mrs. Granger stared hopelessly at the strewn furniture and stacks of boxes. What are we going to do, Doris? Aunt Doris put her arm around Mrs. Granger's shoulders. We'll unpack what we can and rent a storage unit for the rest. A bigger place is bound to come up. Consider this your temporary home until then. So, part 2, the 3 E's. Tuesday, August 29th. So remember, italicized means Jack is writing in his journal. My room is more like an enclosed hallway than a bedroom. I can stand in the middle of it with my arms spread and touch 2 of the walls with my fingertips. Aunt Doris and Uncle Don have been helping us unpack and move the stuff the house can't hold to a storage place. Midway through the first day, we found 2 air conditioning units, which was a huge relief. The units sound like chainsaws, but we don't care. During the day, the house is like the inside of an active volcano. Last night, we went over to Mom's space, which is exactly what it is, a big, empty space. That seems even more empty after our temporary shack, as Mom calls it. They started talking about where the bookshelves, counter, cash register would go. Wanda began measuring the space with a steel tape measure. I sat down on the floor and watched. Mom said that she wanted to open the store by November so she can take advantage of the Christmas buying season. While they were talking, Uncle Don came over to me and asked if I wanted to go for a walk. I told him that I didn't feel like it. He made it clear it wasn't a request, which meant we were going for a talk, not a walk. This is not the first time we've had one of those. Uncle Don is probably in his early 30s. Brown hair, brown eyes, over 6 feet tall, and in great shape. He resembles Dad in a lot of ways, but he doesn't have Dad's sense of humor. We crossed into Idaho Street, which wasn't very busy that time of the night, and walked right past the casino parking lot that was full of buses, cars, and RVs. It was cool out, and I'd wish I'd brought my jacket. When the sun sets over Elko, it's like switching a heater off. Uncle Don told me I'd have to keep my eyes open, that if I saw anyone hanging around our house or school who didn't look or feel right, I was supposed to have Mom call him immediately. If there's a problem, he said, we can be in Elko in a matter of hours. I asked him if anyone in Elko knew who we really were. He said nobody knew. Not the police, not the school I was going to, no one. As far as anyone in Elko knew who we really were, as far as anyone in Elko knows, we are the Grangers from Portland, Oregon. Our father took off a couple of years ago and Mom moved Wanda and me down here because she was tired of the city. Blah, blah, blah. If you slip up and blow your cover, he told me, no matter how minor it might seem, I want you to tell your mother. This made me mad. Everyone thinks I'm the one who's going to slip up. He said that from his experience, people my age have a hard time grasping the fact that our families are in real danger. He couldn't remember how many times they've had to relocate a family because a kid told a friend, girlfriend, or boyfriend who they really were. Uncle Don and Aunt Doris took off a couple hours ago, saying they hoped they never saw us again, which would mean that our relocation was a success. I knew they'd have to leave one day, but I didn't think it'd be so soon. One or both of them have always been with us for the past month. Aunt Doris said it was time for the Granger family to get on with their lives. What do you get if you take the V out of lives? Mom has the space shuttle's postcard pinned to the refrigerator with a magnet. Every time I see it, I think of Dad. I wonder how long it'll be before she sends it. You've got to get a grip, Zach, Wanda said. We're back to the book now. Zach closed his journal. He was sitting on the sofa in the living dining family room watching a black and white John Wayne World War II movie on a television as he wrote. The screen was so close to the sofa it was like watching the movie in a theater. Their mother had gone to the bookstore to interview contractors. Zach had wondered why his sister had not gone with her like she usually did. Now he knew. Wanda stayed at home to have a heart-to-heart with her little brother. Zach? He resented how easily this name came out of her mouth, as if he had been born with it. Are you listening to me? She would have blocked his view if there had been room in front of the television in his face. It's sort of hard not to, Zach sighed. All you've done since we moved here is to sit around and watch these stupid movies and mess up the house. Your legs aren't broken anymore. What's your excuse now? Zach ignored the question. These movies are great. You could learn something from these actors. She glanced at the tube. I don't think John Wayne has much to teach me unless we go to war with Japan again. You never know. You're scaring me, Zach, and what's more, you're worrying Mom, and she has enough to think about without. Oh, please, Zach dismissed her. I'm serious, Wanda raised her voice. Are you going to spend the rest of your life watching television and writing in that stupid journal of yours? Aren't you even a little curious about Elko? She waited for him to defend himself. Zach didn't, knowing it would bug her a lot more than anything he could say. I know what you're trying to do, Zach, she said, and it's not going to work. Jack and Joanne had gotten along pretty well until Joanne had become a sophomore in high school. Up until then, they had been able to talk about any and everything. If Jack had even told her about Commander If, she hadn't laughed or made fun of him. But things changed between them. For instance, Zach wouldn't think of telling her that Commander If had returned from Mars. Nor was he going to discuss why he was sitting in front of the television all day, something he had never done in the past. Zach didn't understand it himself. He had heard someplace that a tragedy usually brings a family closer together. He was learning that this was only partially true. Their tragedy had certainly brought his mother and sister closer together, but somehow the whirlwind had failed to snap Zach up along with them. You're impossible, Zach, Wanda shouted and stomped 3 steps away into her bedroom and slammed the door. Zach believed it was the theater that had separated him and his sister. The summer after her freshman year, she had joined a local theater group and found her calling in life. I'm going to be an actress, she announced rather dramatically at dinner one night. That summer, she saw her perform in 3 musicals. He had to admit, she was pretty good. She started hanging with a group called the Thespians at her high school. His parents got her acting, singing, and dance lessons, and somehow she was transformed into a beautiful being with perfect hair, body, nails, and makeup. She began talking funny and staying in her roles around the house. Zach's friends hung around the house, gawking at her lustfully, which Zach found slightly nauseating. Wanda didn't look like his sister, sound like his sister, or act like his sister. And now he didn't even have his sister's name. She didn't have his sister's name. Zach switched the television off and stashed his journal in his laundry hamper underneath his underwear, figuring anyone willing to dig for it there deserved to read it. He walked out on the front porch and watched a lizard scurry up the siding. That's a dragon to you, Commander If, he said. Then he yelled back inside that he was going for a walk. Zach wandered down the sidewalk, wondering how his sister would feel if she knew she would be stuck in Elko for the next 5 years like he was going to be. After her senior year, the plan was for Wanda to go to college at UCLA in Los Angeles, not far from Hollywood. Maybe the famous Wanda Granger would let me spend the summers at her mansion cleaning the pool and mowing her huge lawn, Zach fantasized. If her career started to wane, she could write an autobiography confessing that her real name was Joanne Osborne. This would get her on all the talk shows, which would lead to a remarkable comeback career. About 5 blocks from their house, Zach came to a school that looked about 100 years old. The building was a gigantic brick structure, 3 stories tall. The sign outside read, Elko Middle School. Classes begin September 5th. Hope you had a great summer. Super weird. It's more like it, Zach muttered, wondering if this was his new school. He walked up the stairs to the front door with the intention of just peeking through the window and found the door unlocked. He stepped inside and was surprised to hear piano music echoing throughout the building. He looked in the office, hoping to ask someone if the school went up to 7th grade, but no one was there. He followed the music down a wide hallway lined with open institutional green lockers that smelled if they had just been sprayed with disinfectant. The music led him to a dim auditorium, which was unlike any grade school auditorium he'd ever seen. It was huge, with row after row of velvet-covered chairs facing a wide stage with an orchestra pit in front of it. On either side of the stage were elevated box seats. Below the boxes hung lush velvet curtains, which were the same shade of blue as the chairs and stage curtains. Above him was a full balcony. The music came from a grand piano on the stage. The only light came from a small lamp lighting the sheet music and the keyboard. Zach could not see the man playing, but he could hear his deep tenor voice. The words were overwhelmed by the powerful music, and so was Zach. It filled his chest and made his legs weak. He sank into the nearest seat and listened. After the piece ended, the last chord echoed through the auditorium, as if it did not want to leave. Zach felt like applauding, but held his hands in his lap quietly because he wasn't sure he was supposed to be there. The sheet music rustled as the pianist removed it from the holder. The piano bench scraped against the wooden floor. The man stepped into the dim light at the edge of the stage and looked out into the dark auditorium. Zach was surprised at the man's appearance. He had expected a refined gentleman with long, delicate fingers and a white, swept-back hair. A tuxedo with tails would not have shocked him, but the man standing on the edge of the stage was nothing like that. He was dressed in work clothes, khaki pants, matching shirt, and heavy boots. Hanging on his belt was a ring with at least 50 keys dangling from it. He wore a pair of dark-framed glasses. What was left of his hair was very short and gray. Zach guessed the man was in his mid-60s, and for his age he seemed to be in unusually good shape. His shirt sleeves were rolled up to his biceps, which bulged under the pressure. His powerful arms hung from a thick, muscular torso, mounted on a narrow waist. If Zach had not seen the man get up from the piano, he would not have believed that this was the same man who had just played and sung the beautiful song. "Well, what'd you think of it?" the man asked. Zach slumped in his seat. It squeaked loudly. "Stay in that seat!" the man shouted. "I mean it! Don't move! I've been looking for that squeak since last spring!" He hurried off stage, and before Zach could decide whether he should leave or stay, the house lights came on, and a moment later, the man walked through a small door near the stage, carrying a toolbox. "You can get up now," the man said. When Zach stood, the seat groaned. "What are the chances? I swear I sat in every seat in this house, a dozen times, including the one you're sitting in, looking for that abomination, and this is the first time I've heard it outside of a performance. I'm grateful to you." "Jack." It was out of his mouth before he knew what he was saying. Commander If winced. "Jack what?" "It's Zach Granger. Well, my name's Sam Sebastian, but most people here call me Sam." He held out a rough, calloused hand that did not look like it could play a grand piano. Zach shook it, hoping that he had pulled off the name change smoothly. "You're new at this school," Sam said. "I'm not sure this is my school." "Where do you live?" "Over on Elm. I'll be in 7th grade." "This is your school, then. We go up to 8th grade here." "Well, thanks." Zach turned to leave. "Hold on a second. What's your hurry?" "I just came in to find out if this is my school." "Are you new to town or just to the neighborhood?" "We're from Portland, Oregon," Zach said. Sam's glasses hung from a string around his neck. He stared at Zach with the most startling blue eyes Zach had ever seen. "My mom's opening a bookstore in town," Zach added, hoping it sounded more convincing. Sam continued to stare. Zach looked away. "I've never seen a grade school with a theater this nice," he said, desperate to change the subject. "This used to be the high school before they built the new one," Sam told him. "They were going to tear this theater down, but we convinced them to refurbish the theater instead. Saved them a lot of money because they didn't have to build a regular auditorium at the high school. The high school uses this theater for their big performances anyways, and sometimes entertainers swing through on their way to Las Vegas or Reno for one-night stands here." Zach wanted to leave before the subject got back to where he was from. "I better get going. I'll walk out with you." Sam put his toolbox on the seat to mark it and walked Zach to the front door of the school. "I guess I'll see you around Tuesday, Zach. Welcome to Elko." "Thanks." Zach started through the door, then stopped. "I liked the song you were playing." Sam grinned. "It's one of the pieces for this year's High School Musical. High School Musical. I was thinking it was like the movie. Yeah, High School Musicals we're doing on Phantom of the Opera." Zach had seen Phantom of the Opera twice with his parents and sister. Wanda had played the CD for weeks, and Zach knew every song. "I saw the musical in New York with my parents," Zach said. "I don't recognize that song." "With good reason," Sam said. "We're doing our own version here. All new music. We're calling it The Opera Ghost, and we're putting a lot more of the novel into the production." "The ghost's name is Eric," Zach said. Sam's blue eyes widened. "You've read the novel?" Zach nodded. "Written by Gaston Leroux in 1910. It was one of the books he had read in the hospital. "Well, that's going to please your teachers. I bet there isn't a student in the whole school who's read the original novel. In fact, I doubt many of the teachers have read it either." "I like adventure stories." "That's something we have in common, then." "What do you do here at the school?" Zach thought he might be the music instructor or the theater director. "I'm the custodian," Sam said. Chapter 8. It's in italics, so he's writing, or Zach is writing. Wednesday, August 30th. I got into a little bit of trouble last night. After meeting Sam, who's the weirdest custodian I've ever met, I continued my walk, thinking I'd drop by Mom's bookstore to see how it was going. I didn't get that far. On the way, I passed the Northeast Nevada Museum and went in for a quick look around. I should have known better. When I get into a museum, I can't seem to leave until I've seen every exhibit and read every sign in the building. This used to drive my parents and sister crazy. It got to the point where they wouldn't take me to museums anymore. I learned that the Ruby Mountains were not given their name because there were rubies there. The early settlers found garnets in the mountains and mistook them for rubies. Pretty disappointing. I found out that herds of mastodons once roamed the plains below the Ruby Mountains. The museum has the bones and tusks to prove it. Elko was built in 1868, about the same time they were laying tracks in Nevada for the Transcontinental Railway. There are 18,420 people here, 18,423 not counting Commander If. I wandered into a new wing they had just opened. It was filled with dead animals, moose, mountain goats, mountain sheep, mountain lions, deer, antelope, elk, bears, and several African animals, including half a giraffe whose hindquarters disappeared into a wall. The exhibit I spent the most time looking at was called Americanuck Basques in the High Desert. I'd never heard of the Basque people before. Apparently, there's a lot of them here. They came over from Spain and France to herd sheep, which seemed like an awfully long way to travel for that kind of job. Sheep herding is not as common as it once was, but there's still a few Basques up in the hills who make their living this way. I was only about 3/4 through the exhibit when a woman who worked for the museum told me they were closing. When I got outside, I was surprised to see it was getting dark. There wasn't time to visit Mom's store, so I headed home. As soon as I got inside, Mom and Wanda started yelling at me. Where had I been? What was I doing? Blah, blah, blah. They were totally panicked. At first, I thought that the bad guys had found out where we were, but this wasn't it at all. Mom said she had called the police and they were out looking for me, all because I was a little late getting home. I can't believe it. I told them where I'd been, and when they heard the word museum, that seemed to calm them down some, knowing what happens to me when I get inside one. While I was explaining, there was a knock on the door, and Wanda led a young Elko cop named Officer Pickney. He said he had just dropped by to say they hadn't spotted me yet. Mom introduced me. So much for the efficiency of the Elko Police Department. It wasn't like I'd tried to hide from them. I'd strolled home down the busiest street in town. Anyway, he said he would call the search off. Some search. Mom showed him to the front door as if he couldn't find it himself. Although you never know. He didn't find me. As soon as he was gone, Mom went to bed saying that she was exhausted. She promised to continue our conversation this morning, meaning I'm going to get another lecture. At this rate, I'll have earned enough lectures to earn a college diploma before I get out of grade school. And that's where we will end for today. Join me tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good day. Bye.